I'm Karin Verspoor, and I'm a computer scientist. I work here at the University of Melbourne in the Department of Computing and Information Systems. And my role in the center is to bring data together. So basically to take all the data that's being generated from patient-reported outcomes, from devices, from the clinical records that are being collected, and put them into a common place and make them available for analysis. And this sounds easy, just take data, stick it into a database, but actually there are a lot of challenges that we have to address around trying to make that data interoperable. And what I mean by that is by relating different kinds of data together and allowing us to get a kind of deep picture of what's going on with particular patients and particular individuals by looking at their individual patterns and how they connect to the longer term effects or behaviors or outcomes that they're noticing. A lot of the complexity in this work is dealing with different granularities of data. So if we're in a normal hospital context, a patient might come in to visit their doctor once every 3 months, once every 6 months, and so we really only get a really limited snapshot of what's going on with the patient. And what we're hoping to achieve with this project is to have much more ongoing information about how a patient is progressing and what's going on with them. And by collecting the data from their daily lives and putting it together with those snapshots, we can actually fill in some of the gaps of what happens once they've left their doctor's office. This brings some challenges in terms of the volume of the data we suddenly have to deal with. If we're only picking up information once every 3 or 6 months, we really have just a very small amount of data that's collected. But once we start talking about ongoing collection of data, for every individual, you might have the equivalent of 6 years worth of data from a normal pace of interaction with the healthcare system. And so we have to worry about the problem of collecting all of this data and storing it in a way that makes it accessible and retrievable and available to the clinicians to kind of put together a picture of what's been going on in the interim. So we have to put the data somewhere, and then once we have it, we have to think about how to really extract the key information from that data. So that requires doing some statistical analysis and actually looking for patterns in the data. So is a patient behaving or exhibiting symptoms that are different this week from what their normal pattern is over the last 3 months or maybe the last year? And so really what we're looking for is not necessarily keeping track of every tiny detail, but looking for changes in the trends or in the overall observations that we see. And so we have to be able to put the data into a common environment along with that whole history so that we can really dig in and look for those statistical differences. Another challenge with that data at such a big volume is how we can present information back to people, and that means both the clinicians, any researchers involved with the project, and the patients themselves. It's really important in today's world that people have access to their own information and feel engaged in the process of their own care. And one way we can do that is by making the data available to the individual patients so that they can see for themselves how they're traveling and how they might be, how their clinical status might be changing. So we can build on the analysis that I talked about earlier to make the insights from that analysis available to the different people who are interested in it. And that means thinking about presenting information in a way that's digestible and interpretable by people. that brings up a whole new set of challenges around how to visualize information. It's easy to put up a little dashboard that just shows you, numbers that change on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, but that doesn't necessarily give you insight into the data. And so some of what we need to think about is how we present the information in a way that's not overwhelming to people, and that actually allows them to see the trends and the patterns in their own data. It's a little bit like saying, okay, all of the information in the world is available to you on Google, but I'm not going to give you a Google search engine to help you find it. I want you to just dig through it all. That's clearly not going to work. You can't read every word that's on the web. And so we need tools and methods that will, first of all, find the really interesting information in there, the ones that are relevant to particular questions, either that a patient might have about themselves or that a clinician has about a group of patients. And that requires having different tools that essentially combine different pieces of the data and allow people to ask questions of that data. Just like you would go to a search engine and type in a query that expresses a particular information need or a particular question that you have, we want to make the data available to patients and to the clinical researchers to ask questions about. And that really means thinking about the kinds of questions that are going to be interesting to people. And in order to work that out, we need to interview people and understand what they want to know about themselves and about their health status. And so we'll need to sit down with both patients and clinical researchers and really understand the kinds of questions that they want to ask of the data. And then we have to go back to the information systems and make sure that we can manipulate the data in appropriate ways in order to answer those questions. So there's a complex interplay between the kinds of questions that people want to ask of the data and the way we represent the data, and then in turn the way we make that data available for people to view the results of any analysis